Hey guys, thanks for joining me, and today is day number 6 of Lent. So today we're looking at the healing of a paralysed man, and this is through the Gospel of Mark, looking at chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. Jesus went back again to Capernaum, where after a few days word got around that he was at home. A crowd gathered so that people couldn't even get near to the door as he was telling the message. A party arrived, 4 people, carrying a paralysed man, bringing him to Jesus. They couldn't get through to him because of the crowd, so they opened up the roof above where he was. When they had dug through it, they used ropes to let down the stretcher on which the paralysed man was lying. Jesus saw their faith and said to the paralysed man, "Child, your sins are forgiven." "How dare the fella speak like this?" grumbled some of the legal experts among themselves. "It's blasphemy. Who can forgive sins except God?" Jesus knew at once in his spirit that thoughts like this were in the air. "Why do your hearts tell you to think like that?" he asked. "Answer me this," he went on. "Is it easier to say to this cripple, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and pick up your stretcher and walk'? You want to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins?" He turned to the paralytic. "I tell you," he said, "get up, take your stretcher, and go home." He got up, picked up the stretcher in a flash, and went out before them all. Everyone was astonished, and they praised God. "We've never seen anything like this," they said. Most people don't realize that this was probably Jesus' own house. He had moved to Capernaum from Nazareth. The point of the first 2 verses is that when Jesus returned from his short preaching trip around the neighboring villages, he found crowds pressing against the door as though he were a movie star or a well-known footballer. Jesus himself was the unlucky householder who had his roof ruined that day. This opens up quite a new possibility for understanding what Jesus said to the paralysed man. How would you feel if somebody made a big hole in your roof? But Jesus looks down and says with a rueful smile, "All right, I'll forgive you." Something in his voice, though, made them all realize that this was different. This forgiveness went deeper and more domestic than mere domestic disputes. Jesus was speaking with a quiet authority, which went down into the paralysed man's innermost being. But not surprisingly, those around him felt uneasy. Only the priest could declare forgiveness, speaking in the name of God. If that's what the man needed, his friends should take him to the temple in Jerusalem, not to a wandering preacher. Mark's way of telling the tale makes it a signpost. It points on, through the twists and turns of the gospel story, to Jesus' trial before Caiaphas in chapter 14. The story is a tiny version of the whole gospel: Jesus teaching and healing, Jesus condemned for blasphemy, Jesus vindicated. The paralysed man's healing points forward towards the new life that Jesus himself will have in the resurrection and will share with everyone who wants it. The key sentence then is the one in verse 10. The Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. The Son of Man is Jesus' language, could simply mean I or something like me, but taking the Son of Man in Mark as a whole, Daniel 7 provides the clue to deeper meaning. There, one like a Son of Man is the representative of God's true people. He is opposed by the forces of evil, but God vindicates him, rescues him, proves him to be in the right, and gives him the authority. In Daniel, this authority enables him to dispense of God's forgiveness. The saying points forward to Jesus' answer to Caiaphas. In many cultures today, forgiveness is seen as a sign of weakness. Revenge, for them, is a moral duty. Sometimes whole families, whole communities are torn apart in this way. It's the only language that they understand. People say as they plant another bomb or aim another rifle. Sometimes whole nations and governments engage in childish but deadly tit-tat for relationships. People who live that way tend to think that God lives that way too. We shouldn't be surprised that when Jesus' unexpected declaration of forgiveness sent shockwaves running through the house, the village, the nation, and finally through the world. It wasn't simply that he was committing a theological crime. The hole in his roof was nothing compared with the hole he was tearing through an entire way of life. Forgiveness is the most powerful thing in the world, but because it is so costly, we prefer to settle for second best. Jesus, already on his way to paying the full price, offered nothing less than the best. Jesus' people have to be for the world what he was for Israel. We have to find ways of bringing healing and forgiveness to our communities. It can be done. Think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, but it is enormously costly. People will oppose it, but the new life that comes as a result is enough vindication, enough proof that the living God is at work. Forgiveness can also, of course, change individuals. It can, as in this case, go down to the hidden roots of the personality, gently healing old, long-buried hurts. Often people think healing and forgiveness is impossible. They find God distant or uncaring, but truth faith won't be satisfied with that. This story is a picture of prayer. Don't stay on the edge of the crowd. Dig through God's roof and find yourself in his presence. You will get more than you bargained for, and once you've met the living, forgiving God in Jesus, you'll find yourself on your feet, going out into the world in the power of God's love. So for reflection today, in what ways does forgiveness demonstrate strength rather than weakness? I think even if we take out the Christianity side of things, this is taught across the world in many ways, I think, in that a sign of weakness isn't forgiving. In fact, the reason that so many people don't forgive or find it so difficult to forgive is because it is so hard. And it's so hard to be the person that stands up strong and forgives something horrific. What does it mean for Jesus' followers to embody his example of bringing healing and forgiveness into the world? And what are the challenges associated with this task today? And I don't think this necessarily means that we're expected to have the power of Jesus and to be able to heal as he did. But we can embody his example of forgiveness. I know when he was asked, I believe I'm terrible at remembering things, by one of his disciples, or by a standby perhaps, about forgiveness, and how many times must I forgive somebody before I'm done with them, or before Jesus, there would be an amount of times that if somebody was to wrong another person, there was certain systems to go through in terms of having to seek forgiveness from God, or give penitence, sacrifices, and then going to the church elders, and there was various kind of things that they had to go through. But I think showing the world the strength of forgiveness without doing all those things, without them having to benefit us, that doesn't mean that we have to take on the hurt, or that those people shouldn't learn what it is that they've done wrong. But we can pray for them, that they can come to an understanding as to why and what it is that they've done to others or to ourselves, and we can pray for God to forgive them, and we can pray that we forgive them, so that we might be a light to them, and that they might see our forgiveness and our strength that comes through Jesus Christ through forgiving them, and make them have a kinder heart as well. Have a lovely day, guys.